Welcome to the show. I'm Brenda with Daniel Weiss and Benny Fluman. And picture this. A cloud security buyer logs into Orca, connects an AWS account, and instead of installing software on hundreds of machines, the screen starts filling with plain English findings. Exposed assets, risky identities, misconfigurations, vulnerable workloads, and a prioritized list of what to fix first.
And that opening scene is the whole commercial story. Orca is a cloud security platform, yes. But the thing that matters in go-to-market terms is brutally simple. You can start without deploying agents. No long rollout. No army of admins. No come back in 6 weeks after IT approves the package.
Right. The user flow is unusually clean for security software. Step 1, connect the cloud account. Step 2, Orca scans the environment from the cloud layer. Step 3, it surfaces risks, misconfigurations, exposed data, vulnerable assets, identity issues. Step 4, and this is important, it prioritizes what matters first instead of dumping a raw spreadsheet of alerts on the team.
That connect, scan, prioritize sequence matters because a buyer can actually see value fast. They're not staring at a deployment project plan. They're staring at their own environment.
Exactly. And in security, time to first insight is not a soft metric. It's the difference between evaluation momentum and evaluation fatigue. If the first interaction is operational work, you create drag before trust exists. If the first interaction is visible risk in the buyer's own cloud estate, you create relevance immediately.
Let me make that even more commercial. Most companies think the advantage here is technical efficiency. It is, but that's not the headline. The headline is lower friction to start. That's what opens the account. Buyers don't buy architecture diagrams first. They buy easy next steps.
So when people say agentless is the product differentiator, you're both basically saying, not exactly. It's also the sales differentiator.
Almost, the product and the sales motion are fused. Agentless changes the operational requirement at the front of the funnel. No agent means fewer dependencies. Fewer dependencies mean fewer stakeholders needed on day one. And fewer stakeholders mean a first meeting can happen before the opportunity gets buried inside a cross-functional approval chain.
And that is where a lot of B2B teams miss the plot. They pitch capability. The buyer experiences friction. Orca's smart move was that the buyer experience at minute 1 supports the pitch. We'll show you risk quickly with minimal setup. That's not just messaging, it's the actual onboarding motion.
I think that's what makes the product easier to describe too. If I'm the buyer, I don't need a 10-minute technical explanation. I can say, we connect our cloud account, it scans the environment, and it shows us the biggest risks without installing agents.
That sentence, without installing agents, is the specific token that removes anxiety. Because internal listeners immediately hear what is not required. No endpoint deployment cycle, no broad device-level change management, no heavyweight implementation, just to see whether the tool is useful.
And let's be honest, in enterprise buying, what is not required can matter more than what's promised. A lot more. Reduced effort feels like reduced risk, even before security teams compare detection depth or coverage detail.
So the surprise is that the technical design changes the psychology of the sale.
Yes, psychology, workflow, and sequencing. It lowers the cost of curiosity. A prospect can afford to say yes to an initial look.
Here's the real GTM lesson. If one stakeholder can begin the process alone, or close to alone, you've already improved your odds before the formal evaluation starts. That's huge. Because the enemy in early-stage selling is not competition first, it's internal inertia.
Internal inertia over external competition. That's a strong claim. Why do you put it that way?
Because most deals don't die after a dramatic vendor showdown. They die in silence. Nobody wants to own a risky rollout. Nobody wants to trigger a cross-team project too early. If your entry point requires security, infrastructure, endpoint, procurement, and compliance all in week 1, you've built your own resistance.
And Orca's motion shifts that entry point. Instead of asking the account to commit to a broad implementation, it allows an initial evaluator, maybe a cloud security lead, maybe someone in infrastructure security, to start with a contained action. That containment matters. It reduces political exposure for the champion.
Political exposure. That's the phrase. Because a champion isn't just asking, will this work? They're asking, if I bring this in, how painful does this become for me internally?
Correct. And if the internal explanation fits in one sentence, first meetings get easier. It's agentless cloud security. We connect the account and see prioritized risk. That's simple enough to repeat upward to a director, sideways to DevOps, or into a procurement pre-call without distortion.
One sentence is not a branding nicety, it's a buying mechanic. If the buyer can't resell your value internally in one clean line, your deal slows down, period.
And the cleaner that sentence, the easier the first meeting with a second team, right? Because now you're not re-educating from scratch.
Right. The message survives handoff. That's rare. In many B2B categories, every internal handoff corrupts the original value proposition. Here, the phrase, no agents, preserves the entry logic across teams because it's operationally concrete.
This is where it connects directly to how we think at Match B2B. Easier start, lower perceived risk, faster decision, clearer expansion path. That's the architecture, not just nice UX, revenue architecture.
Let's unpack the expansion path, because that's where a lot of companies get sloppy. They win a small foothold and then kind of hope the account grows.
Exactly. Hope is not a land and expand strategy. The reason this motion can expand is that the first value is visible and shareable. Once one team sees prioritized cloud risk, adjacent teams have a reason to engage. Security operations may care. Cloud infrastructure may care. Identity owners may care. Compliance stakeholders may care. The initial scan creates internal evidence, not just vendor claims.
And evidence travels. That's the key. If the first footprint produces something a champion can bring into another conversation, here are the risks we found. Here is what matters first. Expansion becomes a logical next step, not a forced upsell.
So land and expand works better when the land is diagnostic, not just contractual?
Yes, that's a good way to put it. The initial motion functions as a proof layer. It demonstrates relevance with the buyer's own environment. That lowers skepticism in the next conversation because the account is no longer discussing abstract platform capability. It's discussing discovered conditions inside its own cloud setup.
And commercially, that's powerful because the conversation shifts from, should we evaluate this vendor, to, what do we do with what we now know? Those are very different meetings.
The second one is a much better meeting.
A much better meeting. And that's the lesson founders should steal. Don't obsess only over your big differentiated feature. Ask a harder question. Does that feature make it easier for one person to start, easier for that person to explain, and easier for the account to expand logically after first value?
Because if the answer is no, then even a strong product may enter the market through a weak doorway.
And a weak doorway is expensive. That's the part people feel too late.
Exactly. Build the doorway first, then earn the building. Thanks for listening.